Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is clean where the base gasket goes. Usually that's not real difficult. It usually doesn't like build up there very much. We'll get it nice and clean. Then I'm going to tap the bolts there. I can't believe I couldn't figure out what that's called. Then I'm going to use a real strong solvent here and a little rag, and I'm going to clean that and clean that. When I get that cleaned, it won't be sparkly clean. I'll have to do some more work, and I'll show you how I do that. Alrighty, so I've used that real strong solvent to clean this all up. It's nice and clean. We put rags in here because the last thing we want is something falling down into the bottom end of the engine. Now I'm going to go over it with a single-sided razor blade. It's the #1 tool for doing this kind of stuff. In fact, if you see somebody with single-sided razor blades like this, ask them if they rebuild engines. If they say no, they're a coke addict, because that's the only other people that use it. All right? Should be back in a bit. Okay, so now I'm going to clean up the threads on these cylinder studs. All right? To do that, we use what's called a tap and die set. All right? These are called dies, and they are for bolts, and these are called taps, and those are for nuts. All right, so each bolt has two things that define it. One is the diameter, all right, and the other one is how many threads per inch. Okay, so using this thread gauge, I was able to determine that it was 16 threads per inch, and it's a 3/8 inch die, so I use this die, which is marked 3/8 16. All right. So what we're going to do is basically we'll put a little lubricant on that and then run that die down on it, and you'll see how much difference. Alrighty, so we have the proper die, and the way you do this is pretty simple. You just put a little bit of lubrication on the threads just to make it easy. All right, I just use WD-40, no big deal. And you take your tap, all right, and there's a way you start it, the way that it's supposed to end. All right, so this end is bigger than this end. Now, the reason most people have taps is if you cross thread a bolt or something like that, you can clean it up. So we start with the side it says to start with, spin it on a little bit, and then it's going to get eventually tighter and tighter. These threads are real clean, so they don't give much resistance. If they do, I have a wrench to run it. So what this does is I run it all the way down. It's gotten tight, so I'll use my wrench to finish it up. And then you can pull it off. Now, there's a lot of people who will say that doing this isn't necessary, right? And there's the same thing with how much I clean up the base gasket area here and the lifter gasket. And a lot of things I do. And you know what? They're right. You don't have to do that. But, and it probably doesn't surprise you, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I like to know it's done perfectly every time, because then you just don't have to deal with it later. All right, so now I'm going to do the other 7, and get back to you in a bit. Okay, little one, I have all of these studs cleaned up. That's called chasing threads. If somebody says you're going to chase those threads, that's what they mean. Or you're going to run a tap or die down it. All right. So the other end of the stud is the bolt that bolts the cylinder head to the cylinder and all that stuff. And this is that bolt. Okay. So this is a 3/8 16 die. This is a corresponding 3/8 16 tap, and I'm going to run it through all those bolts. Once that's done, we can clean this up a little bit, go to putting the base gasket on, and then we'll fit the pistons, all right? So Keaton, I hope what you're seeing is this is really simple stuff. There's nothing magical about mechanics. It's very logical. It's not a guy thing. It doesn't take testicles or a high amount of testosterone to do this stuff. Just a little bit of a logical mind, right? So if you want to do this kind of stuff, it's a lot of fun and satisfying. I highly encourage it. And, you know, some dudes are going to be threatened by that. And if you run into that in your life, you know, you don't need a guy like that. Kick that pussy to the curb and move on to the next guy, okay? All right, I'll get back to you when we're getting ready to put the pistons on.